My name is Garrett Brown. I'm a short-term rental and real estate investor in general from Houston, Texas. I also work at Bigger Pockets as their resident short-term rental expert. And my personal portfolio, I have quite a few glamping sites that we profit. I have quite a few glamping sites that we have a gross revenue over about 700,000 per year currently, and expanding as we go. So all things short-term rentals and glamping is pretty much my world, and I'm happy to talk about it and happy to be here with you.
Awesome. Well, I am very excited. Two specific things. I'd listened to so many podcasts with you on them. I read articles. I was really scrolling through Instagram. You do a great job with reels, by the way. You're just action-packed, info-packed reels are really engaging. Two things I think that are really interesting. We'll just dive straight into it here. You do a really good job of tying back previous jobs to relevant experiences. So there's a lot of people who might be listening. They're, barista at Starbucks. They might have some low entry level job and they're like, this job sucks. I'm not getting anything out of it. But you have a different take on that, how you can take that crappy job or that job that doesn't seem so flashy. Can you talk about maybe some of your previous experiences and how they've shaped who you've become? I mean, 700K glamping expert now, but you started from a very different background.
Yep. So I started as a waiter and a bartender. I was waiting tables when I was like 16 in high school, even though it probably, I don't know how legal that was in some of these mom and pop places I worked, so I'm not going to call them out. But it was just something that, I liked being around people. I liked having these kind of, just more free flowing style jobs. And I was like, the same as some people probably think, like, what skills do you get from being a waiter that's actually going to help you go further in life, and all these other things that I was kind of wondering as I was doing it. But then as I look back and like the further I've went along in my journey, I realized that one of the biggest skill sets you actually get from something like some type of job like that is I understood people better. I just because I interacted with so many people. That's the one thing that really helped me get to where I am now in the hospitality side of things, and how I'm able to mitigate problems with people. I'm able to talk to people and understand them more, because I was dealing with hundreds of customers a day with different complaints, different, you would understand like why somebody enjoyed something and why somebody didn't like it, and then how you can turn that bad experience into something good. And I realized that you don't always have to dwell. If there's going to be a ton of problems that come up in your life, any field you go into, it doesn't matter what you're in, where you try to go. If you're an entrepreneur working a job, there's going to be problems that come, and you can't dwell on those problems. You have to find a solution. And waiting tables and bartending actually taught me that very quickly, because you didn't have time to, go to the back and like pout about like what's happening and it's not going your way. You just had to figure out quick action. And those two skills of understanding people and a wide range of people, it's kind of you grow up and you're in your bubble and you have your set of friends and your family and things, and you only really get interactions with certain people that are with continuously throughout your life. But having those quick interactions with all different types of personalities, it taught me that not every solution is a one size fit all, but figuring out what are the possible solutions to make that particular guest, in my case now that I do more glamping and short-term rentals, how can we solve that to turn their experience into something amazing? So anytime something goes wrong, we have a amazing track record, and why we do so well revenue wise and just word of mouth is because our hospitality. But a lot of that comes back to how I've trained my team, how I've been able to learn on my own how to just take these different things that can come at you and turn, lemons into lemonade, for a lack of better quotes that are out there.
And someone who comes from the business corporate world, who doesn't have restaurant experience, being a waiter, being a bartender, they might not understand the customer is always right mentality that you kind of have to adopt as an Airbnb host or as a glamping host, because you'll get the worst complainers and that you're right and they're completely wrong, but you just got to make them feel like they're the smartest person in the world and just let it go, because the last thing you want is to disrespect one of your guests, get a 1-star review, and then it's a vicious cycle. So I think having that background, having that experience versus some corporate guy or gal who like doesn't have those soft skills from working in that industry, it's a world of difference.
Yeah. And you get to network with a lot of people. It's a little cliche maybe, but like I don't do any deals with anybody I met during my bartending days now, but I met a lot of valuable people that pushed me into different ways within my networking and just my growth in my 20s in general that helped shape a lot of that. Like looking back, if I would have been more into real estate at that time, which, everybody wishes you started earlier in anything, but me just casually meeting people, it opened up doors. Each door opens up to something different that you don't expect. And even like thinking back at some of my bartending days, I used to have one person, one, I call him a client, but it wasn't really a client. He used to have one guy that came in almost every day after work. And he used to blow my mind because this guy would come in, he'd have some drinks, have a good time. I eventually found out what he did. He worked in some corporate sales gig or something like that. But the interesting thing to me was he would always come in and tip both bartenders there, me and whoever else was with us, $100 almost every single day. And I remember thinking like, why is he doing that? Like, what is he getting out of it? Like, but then as I got to know him more, it became obvious like why this guy had done well, even in his corporate gig, because he understood the power of, like being a positive energy around people. And like, also like, he believed in reciprocating things and that, good things will come back to you. I'm not telling everybody you have to go tip $100 every time you go out, but him having that energy and just these like vibes that were around him, it was something that even to this day, this was 10 or 12 years ago. His name was Randy. I'll never forget it. And that stuck with me because it's like, I want to be that kind of person that can go into any situation. He could have even had a bad day at work, but I guarantee you he was going to treat the people there with the utmost respect. And so I can't even imagine what he's doing now. He might even be a multi-millionaire or something now, just because he just went about life in such a way that I was just enamored by, that somebody could just come into I was at a sports bar, it wasn't anything crazy. And just the energy he had around to treat people that, normally we would get, we'd get the short end of the stick a lot. Like, oh, you messed up my drink. You messed up my order. Like, you're terrible. How could y'all do this? But this guy, we could mess up his order and he would be like, it's fine. Just, bring me another one. I'm so glad to be here. And it was like, that energy just meant so much to me. But that came from me just making sure I was talking to people and then also learning from them and like not feeling like I knew everything. You don't know what you don't know. And I embraced that from an early age, and it's helped me a lot. And I still every day think of that mentality.
I think I heard you say in a podcast that one of your favorite quotes or mantras is luck is where preparation meets opportunity. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay,
Yep,
good.
absolutely.
I did hear you say that. So
Yep.
with that being said, are you the type of guy who is just the top performer when you're a bartender or a waiter? Because thinking back to someone like Randy, you might not know that he's like this like huge corporate dude and he has all these connections, and he might see you, Garrett, and he's like, oh wow, this is like the hardest working bartender or waiter ever. And you might get some sick opportunity out of that, even though you didn't know at the time, but like just always performing at a higher level. You never know who you're going to meet, like what connections you might make. So like, again, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. So like if you're prepared, if you're the dude, if you're the best bartender, the best waiter ever, you might just wait on someone who could change your life. So did you have that mindset when you were in that gig? Did you have the foresight, or is it more like looking back, you then realize that like, oh, I made these connections and gained these skills?
I think at the time I was still in college, and I think I was, I'm speaking about Randy, probably was about 23 at that time. And I think, I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but I think I was a hard worker. I went above and beyond. I treated everybody around me with the utmost respect. But I think one thing that I've heard other successful people say, way more successful than me, that you treat everyone the same too, from the janitor to the CEO. And that was one mentality I was trying to really hone in on there. I used to treat, the bus boys with them. I would tip the bus people extra each time. And I would make sure the cooks, had everything they needed. Hopefully my manager from my bar never sees this, but I used to bring the cooks a drink back, in a styrofoam cup, and they would always treat me well, and like I would do things just to make sure people were appreciated. But that has took me so far in life and continuously has grown for me, because then when I got further into real estate, I did the same thing. People would, when I first started in real estate, there would be like, I was a real estate agent. I'm still a real estate agent, not as much as I used to be, but I still have my license. But for the first few years, people would, at our brokerage, we'd get rentals. People would want to come in and get a rental. And most of the agents would be like, oh, like, I don't want that. Like, why would I want to do that? Which this is a great segue into how I even got further with that mentality, because I had somebody come to me and they called our brokerage and they were like, hey, I have a rental condo that I want to put up. Do you have an agent that would want to take it? I was brand new. My broker calls me and she goes, hey, there's a listing it's just a rental. It's like $800 a month, which if you know anything about real estate agent commissions, I'm probably going to make $300 or $400 off that. Nothing crazy. Um, do you want to take it? And I was like, and she goes, we've been hearing great things about you from other agents within our brokerage, saying you're a hard worker and doing open houses on weekends that nobody else wanted to do. And I was like, of course, I'll take it. Like I was hungry and willing to take anything. I met with him. His name was Olatawe. He was from Nigeria. He had been to Houston. He had a couple condos. Met with him, got his listing up, rented it out, made a couple $100. He was a great guy, super nice. Each year for, I think it was 2 or 3 years, I might be a little off on that, he would call me back and go, hey, tenant moved out. Like, I want to put it up to rent again. And I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. Did it. And, remind you, I was getting professional photos done on these rentals, and that was $150, and I'm making $350 or something like that, paying my brokerage $100. Like, I really wasn't making anything. But I knew that the name of the game was impressing people and also networking and getting the word of mouth out there. Fast forward, it's about 2019, and he calls me and he goes, hey, he had a couple other condos that were long-term tenants that he didn't have to rent out. So I never even dealt with them. But he calls me and he goes, hey, I want to get out of these condos actually. And I'm thinking about selling them. Do you want to list them to sell? And I was like, sure, like, let's do it. They were $60,000 condos and in a decent part of Houston, nothing crazy. This is when you could, put up an air mattress on Airbnb and make good money at that point. And so I said, okay, cool. Like, I'm happy to do it. Let's talk about it. And so as we went into it, I had heard about Bigger Pockets a few years ago in the investing side, and my brain was just spinning I was trying to do fix and flips and buy and holds. But then when Olatawe calls me and he goes, let's list them. I went into my investing mode and was starting to think like, okay, I'll list them for sale, but is there a possibility I could buy these and turn it into something? So I researched and I was like, oh, what if I did this Airbnb thing? And so I asked him, I go, hey, what if I took over those condos? Like, could we work out a deal? He wanted to sell them for like $70,000, but we made a deal to where I bought all 3 for $60,000. I got a small like portfolio loan from a bank in the area. This is also when it was a lot easier to get loans too. Put 20% down on each, which wasn't much for $60,000 a unit. And I decided to rent them on Airbnb, put a little bit of furniture in there, get that started. And it was going pretty well. I was making maybe $1,000 a month on each unit. I lived right near them. So I had a small cleaning company that would help me, and I could do all the little, small things that need to be done as an Airbnb host. As that kept progressing, just from that one opportunity, then I started to really be like, okay, this is actually something I could do. Pandemic hit. All the corporate money started buying a ton of single family condos in Houston. And at that point, it's just a race to the bottom with pricing. And so I was like, all right, well, time to pivot again, keep figuring out what the next move is. I can see it. I'm a creative guy. I used to DJ a lot too while I was waiting tables. That was, another thing that I learned a lot about interacting with people, very similar to the waiting gig, to where you just learn how different people are in different parts of the country and the world. And I was like, all right, I want to do something creative, but still do the short-term rental investing and things. And so I heard about this thing called glamping. And that's when I was like, oh, what, wow, nature and being creative. And, people, all these gurus, quotation marks, were online saying, oh, you can slap up a tent and make, $50,000 this month. It's easy. Just do it. And I was like, awesome. Let's do it. And I quickly realized that it wasn't that easy. It's been very, very lucrative and profitable for me, but there's been a ton of, setbacks and a lot of hard work, but it's been, building this business and this real estate investing. It's basically a business mixed with real estate investing when you're doing something like this. And it's been a joy just doing that all together. But a lot of that started early on from me just taking risk, treating every single thing that can, and every opportunity that came to me as serious. I was treating the $1 million listings the same I was treating the $50,000, $60,000 listings. I didn't ever look at them different, because you never, I didn't want to treat people like that. And then you also just never know what's going to, transpire from it. And just for Olatawe giving me that opportunity, it kind of changed my life, for lack of better words there.
Amazing. So before we get into glamping, I really want to touch on the nuts and bolts. I don't think we've had any glamping experts, or at least if they were, they didn't show it. We didn't talk about glamping on the podcast. And I'm going to be sending this episode to my mom because she has asked me for probably a decade at this point if she should build like a little glamping thing on her property. So I'm going to
Nice.
use that as like a frame of reference to ask all these questions. But one, what was your DJ name, Garrett?
I went by Track Sounds. I'm
Track
still
sounds.
TRAKK Sounds. I was a hip hop DJ. I traveled all over the world. I worked with a hip hop artist. His name was Maxo Cream. He's from Houston. I met him when I was about 19. Same time I was waiting tables. I had a little music studio. Again, saying yes to every opportunity. I can keep and treating everybody the same. Like it's a focal point of my life as I'm telling the stories, because Maxo came to me when I was 19. We had a mutual friend. I had just opened up my studio. He didn't have, he was 19. We both were just starting out. He didn't have a ton of money or anything, but I needed some clients, and I was like, yeah, like, let's do it. I'll record you for like $20 an hour. And I would wait tables. And then at night we would go over and record in the studio. Maxo ended up becoming a major artist out of Houston, signed a record deal with Rock Nation and Jay-Z. We got really big. We traveled all over the world. And I did that while I was starting to learn the real estate side at the same time. That's why I liked real estate, because has some flexibility to it, especially as an agent. And yeah, I traveled all over the world doing that while running a studio. But at the same time, I knew that I wanted to build some generational wealth with the real estate investing side. Music was great. It paid the bills. It did okay. It's not as lucrative as people would think, like, especially in my position. I got paid decent, but the artist is really the one that makes the most money. But yeah, and so then as I progressed in there, I knew that I wanted to do something generational. And then here I am today.
So how do you systematize? It sounds like you're a guy who the value of connections and giving 1st.
Mm-hmm.
You're very big on giving first, and then kind of the world will give back to you. Maybe not every single time you give, but if you give enough, like, something is going to come your way.
Oh,
do you systematize that in any way, shape, or form? Like, do you have a list of contacts that you're reaching out to every year? Like, I know some people keep like an Excel file and they're like texting people, just kind of keeping up with them. Some other people might have a certain thing that they do every week or month, whether that's volunteering or whatever. Do you have any kind of a system for being a give first, like a go-giver type of guy?
Yeah, I learned a lot of that I don't like being a real estate agent. It's too salesy for me. That's not my personality. But I learned some very valuable things from being a real estate agent and training under, my broker and things like that, that I built up a customer relationship management system, a CRM, inside of my agent business. But once I didn't have this for my music business at first, and I was meeting people everywhere with Maxo, and we were, doing all these things, but I didn't systematize it at the moment. And I let a lot of things fall through the cracks. Once I learned a little bit more about making a CRM, getting, any contacts you get, no matter how big or small, putting it into a database. And then even, my agent side, I would follow up a lot. I learned quickly with being a real estate agent that following up one time on something that you're passionate about isn't going to get a sale or a deal done. You have to, I think 80% of the time, or there's some statistic out there that's like 80% of the sales happen in the 7th or 8th follow-up that goes on with anything you're doing. And I took that same approach to music, and I started making a database. I would send out, music production beats, and my, like inquiring about, getting hired to do a DJ gig. And I would send out an email. And before, I used to just get so discouraged when they wouldn't answer. And I'm like, oh, okay, they don't like me. It doesn't matter. Like, oh, I give up on them. But then I realized, like, no, I just need to follow up again a few times. And until they say, no, leave me alone, like, then it's probably, there's a chance that you still could have it go through. And a lot of my biggest things that happen in music were because I followed up and systematized it. And then the same with real estate, like, and just in my life, like, I don't want to call it like a Rolodex of people, because I still I knew everybody. I would treat them with the same respect. But you do need some kind of system, especially the more you're meeting people and networking out there, that just is a friendly reminder, like, hey, you haven't talked to XYZ in a while, send them a message. Or if they're local, like, hey, reach out and see if they want to get coffee or something. Like, people in partnerships and relationships are really how you get further in a lot of things. To my knowledge, I'm sure there's somebody out there, but most of the massively successful businesses and anything didn't do it on their own. There's always multiple people involved. There may be somebody that's the face of it, but there's a lot of moving parts that usually go within that. And I really leaned into that going forward, and building my glamping site and everything we're doing in the future that we have planned.
100% agree. I don't think anyone is 100% self-made. Everyone has a mentor or a book or a podcast or YouTube. They have someone in their life who influenced them or helped them in
Yep.
some way, shape, or form. No one's 100% self-made. So I love that
Yep.
team aspect. Let's get
Yep.
into the nuts and bolts of glamping. How did you discover glamping? I know you mentioned that someone had mentioned like, oh, you could put up a tent and make $50,000 next month. But like, what was your first foray and like your first real foray into glamping? Looking at a site, building that out, all the fun stuff.
So the two, I'm a big YouTube University person, like hand up. I learned how to make music on YouTube. Like I learned a lot of things in my life. I learned how to be a real estate agent on YouTube. I learned everything about glamping from YouTube that you can't learn. The two best places are studying under somebody and then also trial by fire. Like I had to kind of start and get it going. I went to different glamping sites to just go stay at some of them as a vacationer, a guest, just to see what I liked. I noticed that there was, some sites that would have 20 tents or 20 geodomes just stacked on top of each other. And I went and stayed in one of those in Arizona near the Grand Canyon. There were some others that were more spaced out. There were some that were more built for families, some built for, couples getaways. And I went and stayed at probably 5 or 6 different ones just to get a feel from my perspective, like, okay, I'm paying top dollar to go stay in these glorified tents, like everybody wants to call them. What do I love about this and what do I not like about this particular place? And then I would make a list. And as it took me like a year or two before I even took action on buying my actual first site. I'm a real estate agent and I had all the data and I still had a little analysis paralysis because it was just so new and foreign to me. But going stay at those sites really opened my eyes to know exactly what my personal desires would, translate well to what I wanted to build, because that has a lot to do with it. Your vision and your end goals are really going to make or break, how you develop and your site or what type of site you go up about. I have some friends that they do the, 20, 30 geodomes on a couple acres and they're stacked on top of each other and they crush it. I have other friends in my particular sites where we like them a little more spaced out. We can get a higher revenue and it's a little more, private, romantic couples getaways kind of vibe. But each one has its own pros and cons. There's definitely a lot, pros and cons to both that are huge. But I understood that from just what I personally wanted and what I wanted to build. It's not, I made a lot of mistakes and we can definitely talk about them to help mitigate there. But I also did a lot of things right because I just took the time to, I always teach people that and tell people that, you got to get to trial by fire and just start. But there's nothing wrong with playing it slow to make sure you're setting up your long-term vision for whatever you're thinking. This is not a short-term rental investing, but it's not a short-term gain. I tell people, let's make your short-term rental a long-term success because this is an endeavor that you're going to be going into for years to come.
So for those who aren't familiar with the term geodome, I know that's kind of your bread and butter. Could you just kind of paint the picture for us? Like, what is one of these things? Does it have electricity? Is there a bathroom? How big is it?
Yeah. So my first structure I built was a geodesic dome. It's basically, you can get different styles. You can get really cheap ones that are PVC piping and it has like a big white, most of them are white. It's like a big canvas tent over it. It has a big window, they call it a bay window. But I went with a little more expensive one that has steel, reinforced bars on the inside. I had architectural plans that I could get permitted by my county. It was a company called Pacific Domes. They're in Oregon. They have a great history. They've been around for 20 or 30 years. And so I went with the geodesic dome for my first one because I thought it looked the coolest. But you can, there's yurts, there's tree houses, there's, when I started, there wasn't as many options, I personally feel like, but in the past 4 or 5 years, the amount of really cool structures that are out there that people can choose from is just exploded. And my advice is go stay at some of them and trust your gut. See what the competition is in your area and see how you feel. Like there's a lot of people that love yurts. That's a really big, and shipping containers, but I personally just didn't like them. I thought the geodomes looked cooler and there wasn't a geodome in my area. So that's why I kind of went with that. And we spent about $13,000 on this geodome. You can get them for much less, but you're going to be replacing it way more. And you're going to, be disappointed that you bought cheap, but we bought it for about $13,000. We put electricity in it. We put a bathroom in it, a really nice bathroom. We put a water well nearby for water. And yeah, we went fully amenitized with a hot tub, all this there. So because we wanted to command a very high luxury price. There's a lot of sites out there too, though, that you could just put up a tent. Some people do the solar and things, and maybe an off-grid toilet. I personally don't recommend that one bit. I'd rather see you at least get electricity, and we can talk about like how to mitigate all those utility costs in a little bit of like how I planned my site to make sure the utilities weren't $100,000 or $200,000 to bring to your raw land, which is a tough thing for people. But it goes back to whoever has the vision for this, what you want to really build out there. That's the cool thing about it, is there's so much flexibility in it. But I went fully on grid, amenitized. I probably spent a little more than I wanted to. I spent about $120,000 by the time this was all done for my first structure. But some of that was utilities. Some of that was setting up a septic tank that also, and a water well that feed all of my other cabins that I'm building and have built on the same site. On this piece of land that I bought with a house on it. Because if you buy a house, I call it land hacking. If you buy a piece of land and it already has a house on it, you already know that the utilities are close. So you're not going to have to pay crazy amounts for electricity to go there. You're going to be able to get a loan or a mortgage a lot easier. It's very hard to get a loan or any type of lot loan for just raw land. A lot of, you're most likely have to pay cash or 60, 50% down for that. I had to put 5% down, which was a $500,000 house. I put $20,000 down to own a very nice house that I could add some equity to, and 11 acres near Houston, Texas. And I, was able to save that cash. The 5% was the caveat to that is it's an owner occupied loan. So you need to live in the property. I don't want to influence anybody the wrong way, but I didn't live there all the time. I did on paper. I lived there. So if anybody's out there listening,
we got you.
You're supposed to live there. Yeah. So, but there's different routes you can go there, and that the land hacking model can be a great start. And you can do so many things with your piece of land that you have. You can do RV pads, self-storage, whatever you want to do. I went the tiny home glamping route, which has turned into something, amazing for me and built into something bigger than I ever thought it would be.
So it sounds like your first deal, you didn't land hack. You had to bring power there. You had to drill a well. You had to get plumbing there, which I'm actually happy about, because thinking of my mom's place, I think when she got quoted by, I don't know if it's National Grid or whatever company, it was like $6,000 per electricity pole. And she needed I think it was like 15 of them or something to span down to the land. It was like a lot of money. It was like 90,000 or 75 or $90,000, something crazy like that. Did you have to deal with something similar? Like, did you have to pay to get electricity poles installed? Did you have to pay to get like town sewer? Or do you have like a huge septic tank, or you drill a well? Just let me know how all the utility installment happened and how much that costs.
So I did actually land hack on the first place. That I think I didn't. So the first place I did is the one that I had the owner occupied loan on. I only had to pay $5,000 to get my pole. The reason I had to pay for more utilities is because I was building back a little further on the land. But I was able to tap in to the water well that was at the main house that I had. I have 4 cabins now on my land on top of the house. One of the water wells I was able to tap into for one of my cabins. But then, because the electricity was already at the site, it was only $5,000 to get a pole into the middle of the land.
Just one pole from the main house.
Yeah, I had to get a septic system, which anywhere you go in the country, the septic is going to be one of your biggest holdups permitting wise, and one of your bigger expenses, because you can't really tap into a septic system that's already built for a house, because it's usually at capacity unless they built a much bigger tank and you have it permitted for that. But you can plan ahead and have your septic become much cheaper if you think ahead of like, how many cabins do I want? And then we built a water well because we were so far back in the property that it was just easier than trenching lines from the main water well that we had. But another even caveat that people don't probably think about is one of the most expensive things when you're turning raw land, or land that already has a little bit going to it, is the road work that goes into it. Because the house was already there, we had a viable road, so I only had to spend, I think, $8,000 or $9,000. Road work's more expensive than I thought it was going to be, but I only had to spend $8,000 or $9,000 to build the road to get back to the first couple of cabins. If I wouldn't have had, a viable road going to the house and just raw land, man, you're looking at $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 possibly just to get this road work infrastructure, because it's way more expensive than you think. So that's another, pro to having the land hacking model. And at the same time, once you move out of that house, you can turn that into a rental and start renting it out, fix it up some, and then force some equity and appreciation onto your land. All this infrastructure you add is huge. The place I bought was about $500,000. It's worth now probably closer to 1.5 million from all of the utilities and infrastructure we put. We're probably all in for 8 or 900,000, over the few years that we've been working on it, but it's easily worth 1.5, maybe 1.6, depending on, if somebody has more money than common sense sometimes. So we'll see how it goes in the future.
And in terms of zoning, I know one thing you mentioned was if you have an idea of how many glamping tents or domes or yurts or whatever you want to call them, if you have an idea of how many you want to build beforehand, you can maybe build the right size septic and well and get the right amount of electricity poles, like whatever. But I'm sure that you're constrained by the town or the city that you're in. Do you get that beforehand? Like, do you go to the city or the town? You're like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. And they're like, okay, you have a max of 4 units you can put here per your zoning, or how does that work?
Yep. So 100%, the two biggest things that, I talk to glamping investors all over the country, and the two biggest holdups are the permitting process for these unique structures, and then the septic. So with my permitting process, I found land. I'm a real estate agent, so I have a lot of data out there. And anybody thinking about this, if you don't already have land or anything, work with an agent that understands zoning and things. I found unrestricted land. It was cattle land. So it wasn't I would never do this in an HOA or anything like that, because you never know if they would turn. Always find land that is non-HOA. If it's unrestricted or commercial, you should be good. But the key, the thing that I did absolutely right was I had 2 counties I was looking at that were near a popular lake near Houston, Texas. I knew I needed to be near Houston because I wanted the inflow of guests coming, and I didn't need to be too far. Raw land in the middle of nowhere sounds attractive for $5,000, but if nobody's ever going to visit there, then it's going to be very hard to get customers. But I knew there was 2 counties, and I was like, okay, I'm going to call each of these permitting departments and just be honest. I tell them, I say, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to build a geodesic dome and a couple cabins. And, at the moment, you may not know exactly how many you want, but just be honest. And I called these counties and I told them what I wanted to do. One county was like, probably not. Like that doesn't, that doesn't sound like anything we want to do. And there's usually only a couple people in these permitting departments because it's all rural, Texas in our area. And then I called the other county and they were like, we've never done that. Like, we're not saying yes, but we're not saying no. And I was like, okay, well, that one seems like it's promising. But then I took it the next step was I called contractors that were in the area, like home builders. And, I needed some people to work. And I would ask them, I go, hey, out of these 2 counties, which one do you think is the easier permitting process? And every single contractor was like, oh, you got to go to county A. County B is going to, be a hassle and all these. And it was the same counties that, that one of them, the county A is the one that was like, oh, present it to us. We're open to hear it. And the other one was like, probably not. I don't see why we would do that. And so lean on people in these areas that have more experience than you, and just be upfront. Don't lie. I've seen some people be like, oh, I called the county and just told them, I wanted to put an RV pad here or something. And then they ended up shutting me down because I didn't permit it right. Like, be upfront as you can, because you don't want to go into a county that is going to be, going through hell on earth just to get something permitted on this process. And they are upfront with you, telling you, hey, it's going to be tough. Like, that's not worth your hassle and everything you're going to go through. Trust the people in your area and just make a few phone calls and just be honest about what you're trying to do.
So I'm guessing a lot of our listeners, if they're like me, have a plot of land or an area in their head now, and they're like, could this glamping thing work? Like, would this be a good place to try to set one of these things up? Could you tell us about your 60-30-10 rule?
Absolutely. It's one of my, it's pretty much every glamping site I even look at now, I analyze. It's a quick and dirty rule. There's some that work better than others, but 60-30-10 is simply, you need to be 60 minutes from a major metro hub. I say 500,000 people or more, but obviously the more the better. I'm lucky to be in Texas. I'm an hour from Houston, 60 minutes, but then I'm also 2 or 3 hours from Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio, which are millions of people there. The 30 is, you need to be from 30 minutes from some type of national, regional, or state attraction. National is even better, but I'm near a lake, the second largest lake in Texas, and I'm also near a national forest, and there's a state park in this general area. So that means, because I used to travel there when I was a kid, with my dad, and we'd get a rental on the lake, and they were doing short-term rentals and Airbnbs in some of these places long before that was even a thing. And so I know that people will consistently travel out there. And then the 10 is just, you need to be 10 minutes from like a gas station or a Dollar General or just some kind of civilization, because it's very hard to get supplies, very hard to get, cleaners and handy people and anything like that if you're, in 40 minutes away from the nearest town. And everything just becomes harder for your guests too. Like, my property that I'm in, it's a little hard to get Uber Eats to deliver out there, but we still can. But even in the new campsite that I just opened up near Austin, a new glamping site, it's so close to, it's 30 minutes from Austin, but it's so close to a bigger town and things that I can, like a guest a couple of days ago, I saw a couple of ants, and he was like, hey, do you have any spray there for ants? Like, he was fine with it. And I was like, oh dang, I forgot to put spray in there. I just instantly Uber Eats some ant spray, turned that 3 or 4 star review into a glowing 5-star review, and took it from there. And you can even, if somebody's having a bad stay, Uber Eats them a cake, or like that's the ability when you're like close to civilization. Though some people, like I said, they see the raw land in the middle of nowhere, and they don't think about the operation side of it that will stress you out more than you even could imagine sometimes if you're in the wrong area.
It sounds like this land hacking thing is key for a whole plethora of reasons. I mean, one, proximity to stuff, just being able to
Yeah.
Uber Eats someone ant spray or a cake or whatever you might want to do. Second one is the
Mhm.
electricity poles, and it sounds like whether it's making a road or a driveway, I'm not sure if it was like a paved road or just like clearing the land. That's expensive.
Yeah.
If you're just like in the middle of some, not, I know
Yeah.
you can't build on a national park. Let's say you're like adjacent to some national park, but there's no civilization within 10 miles. You're gonna be spending a
Yeah.
fortune if you want to get
Yeah.
electricity and plumbing and all that stuff the standard way. I guess you could do
Yeah.
solar and you could have like an offsite bathroom, but you said that's not really your bread and butter, and you would like the elevated stay. Like it's glamping,
Yeah.
right? It's not camping.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem when you go the solar and off grid and all that is you got to think again. It goes back to operations. Something I haven't even mentioned the whole thing is I went to school for hotel and restaurant management. While I was waiting tables, I went to college at University of Houston. They have a Hilton college there. Conrad Hilton went to University of Houston and started his college there. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I thought I was doing more restaurant, but I learned a lot about operations and how critical it is. So when you have solar, off-grid toilets, all this, the nightmare your cleaner has to go through, the nightmare your guest has to go through to learn how to use an off-grid toilet. What if you don't get sun that day for the solar? Then you're gonna have to, there's just so many things that it sounds good, but if you just try to be a little more tried and true with what you're thinking and how it's gonna affect you and everybody that's involved in the operation going forward, you'll be able to make better decisions with that kind of thing that you're doing.
All right, so Mom, you're gonna have to suck it up and have your glamping tents closer to your house, so it'll be a lot cheaper to get these utility poles and the roads and and all that fun stuff. Because that was the thing.
Small,
it's like,
though.
Yeah,
you can start small because
right.
if you get that one pole, get a little. That's what I did. Put the geodome. It's closer to the house because I could have went way back to the back of my property, but I started closer to my house because I built it, got a little cash coming in, reinvested that cash to keep expanding, but it got cheaper each time because I was just slowly going down my plot of land. And so if she was doing that, I would incentivize her to get a little closer to her house. And then you gradually build it further out as you're getting some cash flow and increasing the infrastructure. And each time it's cheaper because, the poles are closer, the water well you need to trench is closer and things like that too. So it's actually probably the best way to start, even though you're a little closer to your house and you're going to have to hopefully set that expectation with guests and how you operate. But there's positives to that as well.
So we're on a personal finance podcast. Let's talk some numbers. I think you mentioned it was $120K all in to build that first geodome, and then you were able to add multiple, probably for a lot less money because you already had the infrastructure there. Tell us about that first year. Like, what were you doing in terms of revenue? What are people paying per night to stay in these things? What was occupancy rates? All the fun numbers that our listeners are looking forward to.
So I got the geodomes. We were already building it. This was January 2023. In the house, we were fixing it up. I already lived in it for a year. And so we were getting ready to rent that out at the same time as the geodome. we launched the Geodome first, and because we went more, like I said, you could do the 20 tents on, crammed up top of each other and get a lot less occupancy rate or a lot less ADR, which is your average daily rate per night. We got the first year we launched, I want to say we were 88% occupied in our Geodome.
Wow.
And we did, I want to say at that time it was like 336 our first year for our average daily rate. We made about 85,000 gross our first year. The second year though, once we started catching, more marketing and more social media buzz and word of mouth, we did 95K gross. We did about 386 ADR. And I think it was about 86, 87% occupied. This year, every year I've been bumping up the prices. I keep reinvesting back to the site. We just added a sauna for like $3,000, like little things like that. But I think this year we're going to get close to about 105K gross. But we also, we rent out the house at the same time. That house, it's not as popular as the unique stays. It makes maybe $60,000 a year, both years. It's a pretty consistent Airbnb rental, just a solid family rental, and we're building equity there. But the creative things to think about as you start to build this infrastructure, I actually formed a partnership with a tiny house, a company called Oud Mirror Houses. They're from Europe. They had just came to Houston, or they came to the US. We were one of the first ones there. But they even have a partnership model, and there's more tiny home people out there that are doing this now, to where they gave me their $130,000 tiny home for free. I have to give them a revenue split. I give them 30% each month of the revenue. And, it's a lot. If I could have bought it cash, I would have, but I didn't. I didn't have that cash because I just built the Geodome. But they liked that I had put, I had some skin in the game, as they called it. Like I had a lot of money already into this property. I already was running it, and they were open to partner. And now I have this mirror house that was so viral when we launched it. There's a few of them now more in the United States. It still does well, but that mirror house, we've had it for 2 years now. It did $115,000 gross revenue both years. And then I think next year we're probably going to do about 120,000. And that partnership,
wow.
I've even expanded further with them. That they helped launch the new Austin property that I'm talking about. We put 2 mirror houses over there with plans for 8 of them. And that property is probably going to do about 90,000 each unit for the first year. And again, I didn't have to pay for these units because I formed a partnership with them. And it wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have put that infrastructure in and took a risk and things there too. So it's not something that you can just automatically get these partnerships out there. But the best part about it is you just need to ask. Like people are so afraid to ask and like look into like be creative sometimes. Like I didn't have a bunch of money coming into this. It was just me. And I figured out new ways to like partner with people. And now there's so many different tiny homes out there too. Like you can get, even just yesterday we closed, well, not really closed. We purchased a new tiny home. It's called a park model because it's on wheels like an RV, but it's like an A-frame on wheels. You can finance those like a car or like an RV loan. And so I financed that under my business yesterday and got an amazing interest rate and didn't have to put any cash up front. And they, financed this $75,000 structure that we're going to bring to our site and probably is going to make $100,000 in gross revenue. So we're pretty excited. And there's a lot of creative ways. I like throwing those ideas out there because not everything has to be money. Obviously it's the more money you have to get started in this, it's great. But sometimes you just have to ask. You don't know until you get told no, to learn that in the real estate days, like my agent days, like you just need to ask and think of how can I be creative with the situation I have and bring my best skill sets to the table. My skill sets are hospitality, operations, knowing how to deal with people, talk to people, how to negotiate with people. The same stuff I learned when I was a waiter and a DJ, just from dealing with all types of personalities. This company is from Eastern Europe. I understood the culture of Eastern Europe and how to just talk to them. And they just operate a little differently than people in the United States. But that came from talking to a lot of people and understanding that there's no two walks in life are the same for people. So you just need to, treat everyone the same and keep progressing and being creative as you're thinking about it.
Going back to the beginning of your answer to my last question, the numbers are just mind-boggling, right? You put in $120,000 and BiggerPockets is pretty, I don't know if they're the ones who invented the 1% rule, but they definitely popularized it where you want 1% of the purchase price in monthly rent. So if you bought a place for $120,000, you want like $1,200 a month. It's like back of the napkin math, but they're like, okay, that could be a potential deal. You're doing like 7,000 a month and you ended the year at like 85K. Like you're
No,
5x the 1% rule.
no,
That's insanity. My question is,
no.
how much more work is it? Like, is this way more work than an Airbnb? Is it comparable work to an Airbnb? Is glamping like come with its, I'm sure it comes with its own unique challenges, but like someone who's looking to get into this and they're a numbers nerd like me and they hear that, they're like, oh my God, this
Yeah.
guy's doing 5x the 1% rule in terms of cash flow. How much extra work am I talking about?
It's about as much same. It's about the same amount of work as Airbnb. I would say, like any traditional kind of Airbnb. The one thing that I underestimated personally, and I'm sure a lot of people will, is the land maintenance. Like there's trees everywhere. You have a lot of land, a lot of road. Like it's just having 11 acres is a lot more to handle than you think, especially when you need it to be pristine. So we pay more for landscaping and all these things like that. But the cool thing about this business is not only do I have, real estate assets that I'm building up and all that, but this is a business that I could sell down the line as, a business with a bunch of assets. And the cool thing about businesses is the higher you get your income, the more valuable it is. And so I have been focusing on how can I have a big goal, for 10 or 15 years to exit and, get sell the company or however I want to do it from that point. But I'm building out the business infrastructure now. Like I work full time at Bigger Pockets. It is definitely a lot of hours that go into this gig and I love it, but I could not operate this without me building up a team. Now I have 3 virtual assistants now that help me. I have a director of operations is what I call her, but she's basically the head of my housekeeping and maintenance and everything over there. And she handles this all. So I've been building out this infrastructure. So going forward, when I want to exit out, it would be, I'll be able to I'll be able to get out of that so much easier than if I was just one person trying to do it all, trying to, I can make way more money if I didn't hire people, but I also see the bigger picture to where I'm trying to set the foundation now. That way, when we do hit 30, 40, 50 units, it's so much easier than, scaling really fast and going, oh, dang, I need to, I need help now. I need to do this. And then you're scrambling, trying to teach people everything and it just it becomes daunting from that point. So without a doubt, it's going to be a little more work, but if you just want a couple cabins on your place and you live near it, like it's a great cash flow. It's a great way to put some equity in there. You're going to have some work, but with softwares and all the things out there now, it's pretty easy to automate it. I think 90% of my system is automated. Like we send out welcome messages, all these, we'll check in with guests like when they're in their stay and it's all automated. And they think it's us that are like actually messaging them. Like you'll see in our reviews, they're like, oh, wow, the hosts are so amazing. They're always checking on us and all this. And I was like, oh, spoiler, that wasn't me. That was my software, but there's so many softwares and things out there now. You can definitely make this a lot less, hands-on, but I don't sugarcoat it. Like the reason you get such a high cash flow is there's a little more work that goes into it. But if you really want to build this into a business and think about like a big long-term plan with it, I highly recommend building out your team more and reinvesting all your profits back into the property to make it as big as possible as you want. But if you're looking for something that's a little more, just some cash flow to help you out and all that, it could be a great tool to move forward with that. And you'll just, maybe 10 or 15 hours a week, you have to do some work on it. But I like being in nature. I like dealing with people and I like guest experiences. So it's kind of like, it's fun to me and personally, but not everybody may find that type of thing's fun.
Well, as we bring this episode to a close, Garrett, I know you are constantly pushing out tons of great content on short-term rentals, on glamping. You kind of share in real-time stuff, the good, the bad, the ugly, which is super helpful to people who are just getting started. Where do you want to direct listeners? Where do you want people to follow up with you, your story, get in contact, all that fun stuff?
Yep. So you can find me anytime we have a channel at Bigger Pockets called Bigger Stays, which is our short-term rental channel within Bigger Pockets. I have a YouTube channel. We have a weekly newsletter. I wrote the book for glamping. It's called The Glamping Investor, coming out through Bigger Pockets for July 15th. So depending on when you're listening to this, you could pre-order it or it might already be out. And that is every bit of knowledge have learned in these 5 or 6 years. And I put it into one, I can't even remember how many pages this is, but it's like 50,000 words. I remember it took me a while to write it, but you can get every bit of knowledge I have for $10 for an ebook and $20 for a physical copy. And I'm on You can find me on Instagram as well, Garrett Brown RE. And I'm always open to answer questions on there. And I love, I'm always online there in my DMs helping out with anybody that I can.
Awesome, man. Well, it has been a pleasure having you on and connecting. And I'm definitely going to be sending this episode to my mom once it comes out because I'm going to convince her to do this glamping thing. She's been talking a lot about it. Now we got some of the tactics down. I'll have her follow you on Instagram and YouTube, all of those good places. And
Perfect.
yeah, man, just want to say thank you, appreciate you, and thanks for dropping all these knowledge bombs on our listeners.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and tell your mom. Anytime y'all have any questions, feel free to let me know. That's right up my alley. I love to help.